My name is Aaliyah. I'm 35 years old, and I've been raising my two kids alone for the past 7 years. This morning, like every morning for the past 7 years, I woke up at 5:30 to get Emma and Noah ready for school. While I'm packing lunches and checking homework, my ex-husband Tyler is probably still sleeping in his childhood bedroom at his parents' house where he's lived since our divorce. What I didn't know was that 7 years later, when his perfect little world came crashing down, he'd come crawling back to me expecting salvation. Before I dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, this journey has more twists than you might expect, so stick around to see how karma has a way of coming full circle. I met Tyler back in 2010 when I was 23 and he was 25. We were both in college, and honestly, he swept me off my feet. Tyler had this confident charm that made everyone gravitate toward him. He was funny, outgoing, and seemed to have his life together. What I didn't realize was that his confidence came from never having to face real consequences for anything. Tyler came from what you'd call a comfortable middle-class family. His parents, Patricia and Robert, had worked hard to give their children everything they wanted. Patricia was a retired teacher, and Robert had been a manager at a manufacturing plant for 30 years. They had two kids, Tyler and his older sister, Jessica. But here's the thing, while Jessica was encouraged to be independent and successful, Tyler was treated like he could do no wrong. From the very beginning, I noticed things that should have been red flags. When Tyler and I started dating seriously, I'd visit his family home regularly. Patricia would literally do Tyler's laundry, make his bed, and cook all his meals. When I suggested maybe Tyler could help with dishes after dinner, Patricia would wave me off saying, "Oh, Tyler never had to do laundry, dear. Maybe you should handle those things." I thought it was just old-fashioned thinking, but looking back, I can see they were creating a monster. When I got pregnant with Emma in 2011, Tyler's reaction wasn't excitement about becoming a father. Instead, he complained about having to sacrifice his time with friends. He'd say things like, "I guess my fun days are over now." Meanwhile, I was working part-time while pregnant and still expected to handle all the household responsibilities. Tyler worked full-time, but somehow his paycheck always went toward what he called fun activities, while I stretched my part-time income to cover groceries and baby supplies. Even during my pregnancy, Patricia would interfere constantly. She'd tell Tyler things like, "You work so hard, you shouldn't have to come home to a messy house." It was like she was programming him to expect me to be his personal maid and nanny. When I tried to talk to Tyler about sharing responsibilities, he'd throw his mother's words back at me. "My mom says you're being too demanding. Marriage should be easy, not all this drama." I remember one particular evening when I was 7 months pregnant with Emma. I'd worked a 6-hour shift at the retail store, came home exhausted, and found Tyler playing video games while dishes piled up in the sink. When I asked him to help with dinner, he actually said, "Can't you see I'm busy? Besides, you're better at cooking anyway." That night, I called my own mother crying, and she told me something I'll never forget. She said, "Honey, you can't change a man who doesn't want to change. You can only change how you respond to him." But I was young and in love, and I thought having a baby would make Tyler step up and become the partner I needed. Boy, was I wrong about that. When Emma was born in late 2011, I quickly realized that Tyler viewed fatherhood as something that happened around his schedule, not something that required him to adjust his lifestyle. He'd complain every time Emma cried at night, saying he needed his sleep for work. Meanwhile, I was getting maybe 3 hours of sleep a night between feedings and diaper changes, but I was still expected to have dinner ready when he got home. Things got even more complicated when Noah was born in 2014. Now I had a toddler and a newborn, and Tyler's contribution to parenting was minimal at best. He'd hold the babies for photos and when his parents visited, but the actual work of raising children fell entirely on my shoulders. Patricia and Robert's favoritism became even more obvious once the grandchildren arrived. They'd take Tyler on weekend trips to help him relax from the stress of being a new father, but they never invited me and the kids. They'd buy Tyler expensive gifts for his birthday and Christmas, but Emma and Noah would get cheap toys from the dollar store. When I mentioned this imbalance to Tyler, he'd shrug and say, "That's just how they are. Don't make it a big deal." My typical day during those years started at 5 in the morning. I'd get up to prepare bottles for Noah, get Emma ready for daycare, pack Tyler's lunch, and have breakfast ready for him by 7:30. Tyler would roll out of bed at 9, eat the breakfast I'd prepared, and head to work. I'd drop the kids at daycare, work my part-time shift at the department store. Pick up the kids, come home to cook dinner, give the children baths, read bedtime stories, and collapse into bed around 11, only to start the cycle over again. Tyler, meanwhile, would come home around 6, eat the dinner I'd prepared, and then disappear into the bedroom to play video games until midnight. On weekends, he'd sleep until 10, then announce he was going out with friends because he needed guy time. I'd be left alone with 2 small children while he went to bars or sporting events. The breaking point came when Emma turned 3 in November 2014. I'd been planning her birthday party for weeks, buying decorations on my tiny budget, baking her cake from scratch, and coordinating with other parents for a small celebration. The morning of her party, Tyler announced he was going to a football game with his buddies because it's an important game and the party is just kid stuff anyway. I stood in our kitchen, holding our 3-year-old daughter, while our 10-month-old son cried in his high chair, and I realized that Tyler saw his children as accessories to his life, not human beings he was responsible for nurturing and protecting. When I confronted him about missing Emma's birthday, he actually had the audacity to say, "She won't even remember this when she's older. Stop being so dramatic." That night, after Emma's little friends had gone home, and I'd cleaned up streamers and cake crumbs, I tucked my babies into bed and made a decision that would change all our lives forever. I couldn't keep living like a single mother while being married to someone who contributed nothing but additional stress to our household. By 2017, I'd reached my breaking point. Emma was 6 and starting to ask why Daddy never helped with anything, and Noah was 3 and barely had a relationship with his father. I'd tried marriage counseling, but Tyler refused to attend after the first session because the therapist suggested he needed to take more responsibility at home. "She's obviously biased against men," he'd said. "I'm not paying someone to attack me." The decision to divorce Tyler wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I was already functioning as a single parent while dealing with the additional burden of Tyler's demands and his family's criticism. When I told Tyler I wanted a divorce, his first reaction wasn't sadness about our family breaking up. Instead, he was angry that I was embarrassing him in front of his parents. Patricia's reaction was swift and vicious. She called me the day after I filed divorce papers and screamed at me over the phone. "You're destroying our family, Aaliyah. Tyler is a good man and you're just ungrateful. You don't know how good you have it. No other man will ever want a woman with 2 kids and your attitude." Robert was more subtle but equally threatening. He showed up at my workplace and told my manager he was concerned about my stability and whether I should be handling customer money. He also made it clear that they had financial resources I couldn't compete with. "We have lawyers, Aaliyah. Good lawyers. We'll make sure Tyler gets those kids if you keep pushing this nonsense." Even Jessica, who I'd always thought was somewhat reasonable, initially took her family's side. But during one particularly heated family gathering, she pulled me aside and said something that shocked me. "Mom and Dad created this monster, Aaliyah. Tyler never learned to be a real man because they never let him fail. But they'll never admit that, and they'll destroy you before they'll admit they were wrong." The custody battle was brutal and expensive. Tyler's parents hired him an attorney that cost more than I made in 6 months, while I had to represent myself and work extra hours just to pay the court filing fees. Tyler's lawyer painted me as an unstable single mother who was trying to alienate the children from their loving father. They actually argued that Tyler's close relationship with his parents was evidence of his strong family values. During the court hearings, Tyler put on quite a performance. He talked about how much he loved his children and how devastated he was that I was trying to keep him from them. He conveniently left out the fact that he'd never changed a diaper, never attended a parent-teacher conference, and couldn't tell you what his children's favorite foods were. But Tyler's lawyer had taught him well. Between hearings, he'd promise Emma and Noah elaborate trips to Disney World and toy shopping sprees if they came to stay with Daddy. Then he'd fail to show up for scheduled visits and tell the kids it was because Mommy won't let Daddy see you. Emma, who was smart even at 6, started to see through these manipulations. But Noah was too young to understand why Daddy kept making promises he wouldn't keep. The worst part was Tyler's dirty tactics during the custody evaluation. He'd schedule visits with the kids and then not show up later, claiming in court that I'd prevented the visit. He'd call me pretending to want to talk to the children, then record our conversations and take snippets out of context to make me sound angry and unreasonable. Finally, after 8 months of legal hell, we reached a settlement. I was awarded full physical custody of Emma and Noah, with Tyler getting weekend visitation every other week. The child support was set at $400 a month for both children, which barely covered their school supplies and clothes, let alone food and housing. As we left the courthouse that final day, Tyler's mask slipped completely. The loving father act disappeared and his true nature showed. "You'll regret this, Aaliyah," he said with venom in his voice. "My family will make sure you struggle every day for what you've done. Mark my words, you'll come begging back to me when you realize you can't handle this alone." I looked at him holding Emma's hand while Noah clung to my leg, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief that my children and I were finally free. The first year after the divorce was the hardest year of my life, but it was also the year I discovered just how strong I really was. Tyler's prediction that I'd come crawling back seemed like it might come true during those first few months. I was working 2 jobs just to keep our heads above water. Mornings I worked the early shift at Molly's Diner serving coffee and eggs to truckers and construction workers starting at 5:30. Evenings I cleaned offices downtown vacuuming and emptying trash cans until almost midnight. Emma and Noah spent long days at daycare, sometimes 12 hours, when I couldn't find anyone to pick them up between my jobs. Emma, who was only 7, started developing a maturity that broke my heart. She'd help Noah with his shoes and backpack, reminding him to use the bathroom before we left for school. I'd find her in the kitchen, trying to make peanut butter sandwiches for their lunch because she didn't want to burden me. Tyler, meanwhile, kept his promise to make our lives difficult. He missed child support payments 3 months in a row, claiming he was having temporary financial difficulties, while posting photos on social media of his new motorcycle and weekend trips to casinos with his latest girlfriend. When I took him back to court for non-payment, his lawyer argued that my vindictive divorce had caused Tyler emotional distress that affected his work performance. Patricia and Robert's cruelty during this time was breathtaking. They lived 15 minutes away from us, but they refused to help with their grandchildren in any way. When Emma had strep throat and I had to miss 2 days of work to care for her, I called Patricia desperately asking if she could watch Noah just for a few hours so I wouldn't lose both jobs. Her response was ice cold. "You made your choice, Aaliyah. You wanted to do this alone, so do it alone." The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in March of 2018. I'd worked a double shift at the diner because another waitress called in sick, rushed to pick up the kids from daycare, and came home to find our electricity had been shut off because I was 3 days late on the bill. Emma had a science project due the next day, Noah was running a fever, and I had exactly $12 in my checking account. I sat in my car in our driveway looking at my children in the back seat, and I broke down completely. I sobbed so hard that Emma climbed into the front seat and put her little arms around me. "It's okay, Mommy," she whispered. "We're going to be okay. We have each other." That's when Mrs. Rodriguez knocked on my car window. She was our elderly neighbor who I barely knew, but she'd apparently noticed me crying. "Mija," she said in her gentle voice, "bring those babies inside. You don't have to do this alone." Mrs. Rodriguez became the grandmother my children had never had. She watched Noah when he was too sick for daycare, helped Emma with homework when I was working late, and taught me how to stretch a dollar further than I'd ever imagined. She'd bring over pots of homemade soup and insist she'd made too much or show up with bags of clothes her grown children had outgrown, claiming she needed to clean out her closets. Slowly, I started building a support system beyond Mrs. Rodriguez. I connected with other single mothers at Emma's school, and we formed an informal network of mutual aid. Sarah, whose ex-husband also paid sporadic child support, would watch my kids when I had evening work, and I'd return the favor when she needed coverage. Maria, who worked at a local bank, helped me understand how to improve my credit score and set up a savings account. By 2019, I'd managed to stabilize our situation enough to take evening classes online. After the kids went to bed, I'd study bookkeeping and small business management on my laptop at our kitchen table. It took me 2 years to complete a certification program that most people finish in 8 months, but I was determined to build something better for my family. In 2021, I started offering bookkeeping services to local small businesses from my home. My first client was the owner of Molly's Diner, who knew I was smart with numbers and trustworthy with money. Word spread, and within 6 months, I had 8 regular clients. By 2022, I was making more money working from home than I'd ever made at my 2 jobs combined. Tyler's involvement during these years was sporadic and damaging. He'd disappear for months at a time, then suddenly show up demanding to see the kids without any advance notice. He'd promised Emma and Noah camping trips and amusement park visits that never materialized, leaving them disappointed and confused. His girlfriend situation was a revolving door of women who'd stick around just long enough to meet the kids before deciding they didn't want the complications of dating a man with children and responsibilities. Emma, who was now 10, started expressing her feelings about her father's inconsistency. "Why does Daddy only visit when he wants something?" she asked me one evening after Tyler had canceled a planned weekend visit to go to a bachelor party. I didn't have a good answer for her because there wasn't one. Tyler saw his children as props in his own life story, not as individual people deserving of consistency and love. But despite Tyler's failures as a father, my children were thriving. Emma was on the honor roll and had discovered a talent for art that her teacher said was exceptional for her age. Noah had overcome the speech delay he'd developed during our most stressful period and was showing remarkable aptitude in mathematics. Both kids had developed a resilience and emotional maturity that amazed me daily. By early 2023, I felt confident enough to take the biggest leap of my professional life. I rented a small office space and officially launched Precision Books, my accounting firm specializing in small business financial management. The business grew quickly through referrals, and for the first time since my divorce, I felt financially secure. I'd even started college funds for Emma and Noah. Tyler's child support had become even more irregular, dropping to about $200 a month when he remembered to pay it all. But honestly, we didn't need it anymore. We'd learned to depend on ourselves, and we were stronger for it. While I was building a life and career from scratch, Tyler was living in the same bedroom he'd grown up in his life, essentially frozen in time. From what Jessica told me during her rare visits to town, Tyler had drifted from job to job, never staying anywhere longer than 2 years. He'd blame his departures on difficult bosses or unfair workplace politics. But Jessica suspected the real issue was Tyler's inability to handle criticism or responsibility. Patricia and Robert enabled this lifestyle completely. They charged Tyler no rent, did his laundry, cooked his meals, and even gave him an allowance when he was between jobs. At 37 years old, Tyler was living like a teenager, and his parents seemed content to keep him dependent forever. His relationships with women followed the same pattern as his employment, a series of short-lived connections that ended when his girlfriends realized they were dating a man-child. But everything changed in early 2024. Patricia, who was 67, began showing signs of early-onset dementia. At first, the family dismissed it as normal aging, but when Patricia started forgetting how to get home from the grocery store and calling Tyler by his father's name, they couldn't ignore the reality anymore. Robert, who was 70, had always been the steady provider, but a hip replacement surgery in March led to complications that left him weakened and dependent on a walker. For the first time in their marriage, Robert couldn't take care of Patricia, and Patricia couldn't take care of the household. Suddenly, Tyler was expected to step up and handle responsibilities he'd never learned. He couldn't figure out how to manage his mother's medications, didn't know how to cook anything beyond frozen dinners, and was overwhelmed by basic household tasks like grocery shopping and bill paying. Jessica lived in California with her own family and job, so she couldn't provide daily help. The situation deteriorated quickly through the summer. Patricia's dementia progressed rapidly, and she required constant supervision. Robert's health continued to decline, and doctors started talking about the need for assisted living or full-time care. Tyler found himself in the position of being a caregiver for 2 aging parents, a role he was completely unprepared for. The financial reality hit them in September, when they got quotes for memory care facilities. The cost was over $4,000 a month per parent, money they simply didn't have. Robert's retirement savings had been depleted by medical expenses, and their house, while paid off, needed major repairs they couldn't afford. Tyler's sporadic employment history meant he had no savings and terrible credit. The final blow came when Tyler was fired from his latest job at a sporting goods store for excessive absences. His manager had been understanding about Tyler needing to care for his parents, but when Tyler missed 3 consecutive days without calling in, patience ran out. His girlfriend at the time, Sarah, left him shortly after saying, "I didn't sign up to be a caregiver for your whole family, Tyler. You need to get your life together." In October, Patricia fell and broke her hip, requiring emergency surgery and rehabilitation. Robert's health took another turn for the worse, and he was hospitalized for a week with pneumonia. Tyler sat alone in his childhood home, surrounded by medical bills and insurance forms he didn't understand, finally beginning to grasp the weight of real adult responsibility. For the first time in his life, Tyler couldn't run to his parents for solutions. They needed him to be the solution, and he had no idea how to be that person. The golden child was finally being asked to carry his own weight, and he was crumbling under the pressure. It was 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night in October when my phone rang. I was in my home office finishing up monthly reports for a client when Tyler's name appeared on my screen. We hadn't spoken in over a year, and seeing his name sent a jolt of anxiety through me. My first thought was that something had happened to Emma or Noah, even though they were both asleep in their beds upstairs. Aaliyah, Tyler's voice was barely recognizable. Gone was the confident, sometimes arrogant tone I remembered. He sounded broken, exhausted, desperate. I know we haven't talked, and I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need help. My parents, everything is falling apart. I listened as Tyler explained the situation with Patricia's dementia and Robert's declining health. His voice cracked as he described trying to manage medications, doctor appointments, and household tasks he'd never learned to handle. Despite everything he'd put me through, I felt a twinge of sympathy. Watching your parents age and become vulnerable is heartbreaking under the best circumstances. But that sympathy evaporated when Tyler showed up at my office unannounced 3 days later. He looked terrible, thinner than I'd ever seen him, with dark circles under his eyes and clothes that clearly hadn't been washed in days. But it wasn't his physical appearance that shocked me, it was his presumption. "Aaliyah, you were always so good at handling things," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk without being invited to sit. "You know how to manage finances, deal with medical stuff, all that complicated adulting that I never learned. I need you to help me figure out what to do with my parents." I stared at him in disbelief. This man who had mocked my struggles, who had told me I'd come crawling back, who had abandoned his children and failed to pay child support consistently, was now asking me to solve his family crisis. Tyler launched into his sob story, detailing his parents' conditions and the financial impossibility of their care needs. "I know I messed up with us, Aaliyah. I know I wasn't the husband or father I should have been. But you have to understand, my parents never taught me how to handle real problems. They did everything for me, and now I don't know how to do anything for them. The audacity of what he said next still takes my breath away. I was thinking maybe we could work together on this. You could help me manage their care. Maybe I could move back in with you and the kids temporarily to save money. It would be good for Emma and Noah to have their father around more, and we could be a family again. I let him talk, watching this man who had once called me ungrateful and predicted I'd fail now, begging for my help and expertise. He actually suggested that I owed him assistance because he was the children's father, conveniently ignoring the 7 years he'd barely participated in their lives. When Tyler finished his pitch, I called Emma and Noah down from the living room where they'd been doing homework. Emma, now 12, looked at her father with a mixture of pity and protectiveness. She moved closer to me, clearly recognizing the manipulation in Tyler's desperation. Noah, who was 9, seemed confused by seeing his father so defeated and vulnerable. Tyler tried to work his charm on the kids, telling them how much he'd missed them and how wonderful it would be if they could help Daddy through this difficult time. But Emma was having none of it. "Dad," she said with remarkable maturity, "you've been going through difficult times our whole lives, and you never asked for our help before. You only show up when you need something." After I sent the kids back upstairs, I sat across from Tyler and had what would be our final meaningful conversation. 7 years ago, I told him. "You said I'd come begging back to you when I realized I couldn't handle things alone. You said your family would make sure I struggled. Well, looks like you got that prediction backwards." Tyler's demeanor shifted when he realized I wasn't going to rescue him. The desperation turned to anger, the same anger I'd seen during our divorce proceedings. "You're being vindictive, Aaliyah. This isn't about us anymore. This is about the kids. They need their father, and I need my family." "The kids have been fine without you," I replied calmly. "They've been more than fine, they've thrived. This isn't about them needing their father. This is about you needing someone else to solve your problems like your parents always did." Tyler made one last desperate attempt to manipulate the situation. He threatened legal action to get more custody time, claiming I was alienating the children from him by not supporting his family crisis. He suggested that any judge would see his current situation as grounds for modifying our custody arrangement. I looked at this man who had contributed so little to his children's actual lives, who had missed support payments and broken countless promises, and I felt nothing but calm resolve. "Tyler," I said, "if you want to go back to court, my lawyer and I will be ready. But this time, Emma and Noah are old enough to tell a judge exactly what kind of father you've been. Are you sure that's a conversation you want to have in front of a stranger? Tyler left my office that day defeated, and I knew he wouldn't follow through on his legal threats. He didn't have the money for lawyers anymore, and deep down, he knew that his children's testimony wouldn't help his case. Sitting in my office after Tyler left, I found myself reflecting on the strange turn our lives had taken. 7 years earlier, I'd been the one struggling, working multiple jobs, stretching every dollar, and wondering if I'd made the right choice in leaving him. Now Tyler was the one facing the reality of adult responsibilities without any safety net, while I'd built a stable, successful life for my children and myself. The irony wasn't lost on me that Tyler's return had actually validated every difficult choice I'd made during those early years. His desperation proved that I'd been right about his character, his inability to handle real responsibility, and his expectation that others would always clean up his messes. But what struck me most was how my children had responded to seeing their father in crisis. Emma's protective instincts toward me and her clear-eyed assessment of Tyler's motivations showed me that she'd learned to recognize manipulation and emotional blackmail. Noah's confusion was natural for his age, but he didn't beg me to help his father or express any desire to save Tyler from his circumstances. My kids had learned something invaluable from watching me navigate single parenthood, that love means showing up consistently, not just appearing when you need something. They'd learned that words without actions are meaningless and that family is built through daily choices, not biological connections. About a month after Tyler's visit, I heard through Jessica that he'd eventually found state assistance programs to help with his parents' care. Patricia was placed in a memory care facility, and Robert moved to an assisted living community. Tyler had to learn basic life skills out of necessity, getting a steady job at a local warehouse and renting a small apartment near his parents' facilities. The kids maintained limited contact with Tyler, now structured phone calls every other week and supervised visits once a month. But there's no manipulation anymore, no false promises or emotional manipulation. Tyler seems to have finally accepted that his children have a life that doesn't revolve around his needs and crises. Emma is now applying to specialized art programs for high school, her talent having blossomed under the encouragement of teachers who recognize her potential. Noah continues to excel in advanced mathematics and has developed a quiet confidence that amazes me. Both children have learned empathy without becoming enablers, compassion without sacrificing their own well-being. As for me, I've started seeing someone new. James is a high school teacher who understands the value of partnership, who shows up for small moments as well as big ones. He's met Emma and Noah, and they like him because he treats them as individuals worthy of respect, not obstacles to dating their mother. My business continues to grow, and I'm considering expanding to offer financial consulting services. The scared young woman who sat in a courthouse 7 years ago, wondering if she was destroying her children's lives, has become someone who helps other people build financial stability and independence. Last week, Emma asked me something that showed me how much wisdom she's gained from our journey. "Mom," she said, "do you ever regret divorcing Dad?" I thought about it seriously before answering because I wanted to give her an honest response. "Emma," I told her, "I thought I was breaking up a family when I divorced your father, but what I was actually doing was creating space for a healthier family to grow. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of their choices, even when it's painful to watch." The most important lesson I've learned is that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up every single time and building something better from the pieces. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them the first time. You can't save people from themselves, but you can save yourself and those who depend on you. My children learned that family isn't about blood relations or legal obligations. It's about people who show up for each other, who keep their promises, who celebrate your successes and support you through failures. They learned that love is a verb, not just a feeling, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior. Tyler's return taught me that I'd been right about everything. Right to leave, right to struggle alone, rather than accept his version of help. Right to believe that my children and I deserved better than what he was offering. 7 years ago, I thought I was losing everything. Today, I know I was finding myself. The scared single mother who used to cry in her car because she couldn't pay the electric bill has become a woman who runs her own business, owns her own home, and is raising 2 incredible human beings who know their worth. We built this life one day at a time, one difficult choice at a time, one moment of refusing to settle for less than we deserved. And that's a victory no one can take away from us. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between staying in a comfortable but unhealthy situation or taking a risk on something better? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming challenges and finding strength you didn't know you had. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to choose yourself and build the life you deserve. Thank you so much for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most beautiful destinations. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.